What happens when your entire family turns against you? When your own sister screams that you've ruined everything and your parents agree, leaving you feeling completely alone. Olivia sat on the edge of her bed, her heart racing, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. The voices on the other end were sharp, cutting through the air like knives. Her sister, Sophie, was yelling, accusing her of everything, of being selfish, ungrateful, and of ruining their family. And worse, her parents, the ones who had always been her support, her rock, were agreeing with Sophie. You don't even get it, do you? Sophie's voice cracked through the line. You've always been in the way, Olivia. Always trying to be the perfect daughter, trying to outshine me. Well, guess what? You've finally gone too far. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She couldn't break down now, not when it felt like her entire world was collapsing. Her breath was shaky, but she forced herself to speak, trying to hold onto some shred of control. Sophie, I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to help. I've always tried to make things right. Her voice trailed off, but the words felt like a whisper in the storm of emotions surrounding her. But before she could finish, her mother's voice joined the fray, cold and distant. Olivia, you've really gone too far this time. Your sister is right. You need to take responsibility for your actions. This isn't just about you anymore. Olivia's hands trembled as she pulled the phone away from her ear, staring at it in disbelief. Her mother had always been the one to understand her, to support her, to listen when no one else would. But now everything had changed. She felt like a stranger in her own family. I don't understand, Olivia whispered, almost to herself. How can you both say this? I've always been there for you. Her father's voice was the final blow. Sometimes, Olivia, people have to learn the hard way. Your sister's been the one holding things together. You've just been a distraction. We've tried to help you, but maybe it's time you face the consequences of your actions. Olivia's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She had never imagined her family could turn against her so completely. She felt like she was suffocating in the weight of their disappointment, their anger. With trembling hands, Olivia ended the call. She sat there, frozen, the silence of her room now louder than the chaotic words that had just been spoken. The sting of betrayal burned in her chest, a deep ache she couldn't escape. She wanted to scream, to fight back, to tell them how unfair this was. But there was no point. They had made up their minds. They had chosen Sophie. And now Olivia had no place in their lives. Her mind raced, spinning in circles. What was she supposed to do now? Stay here, in this house where every corner felt like a reminder of her failure? Or leave, walk away from everything, and try to build a life on her own? As the minutes ticked by, Olivia felt a sense of finality settle over her. This was it. There was no going back. She couldn't stay here and pretend everything was fine when it was clear that her family no longer wanted her. She stood up, her legs unsteady as she walked over to her closet. She stared at the clothes hanging there, the memories of her life in this house. Every piece of clothing felt like a weight, a reminder of the person she had once been, the daughter who tried so hard to be everything for everyone. But that person was gone now. Olivia grabbed a suitcase, opening it with shaky hands. She began to pack, stuffing in clothes, books, anything that might help her start over. The reality of what she was doing hit her like a punch to the gut. She was leaving. She was walking away from her family, from everything she had ever known. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that staying here would only destroy her. The toxic air of resentment and anger would suffocate her if she didn't escape. She needed to find her own path, even if it meant doing it alone. She looked around the room one last time, taking in the familiar sights, the framed pictures on the wall, the bed where she had spent countless nights dreaming of a future she now had to redefine. Her life was changing, and there was no turning back. With one final look at the house that had been her home for so long, Olivia stepped outside. The cool night air hit her face, a sharp contrast to the heat of the argument she had just endured. She walked to her car, her heart pounding, her thoughts a chaotic mess of anger, sadness, and fear. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't have a plan, but she knew she couldn't stay here any longer. She couldn't let her family's words define her any longer. Olivia started the engine, the hum of the car filling the silence as she drove away. The road ahead was unknown, but for the first time in her life, she didn't care. She was done being the person everyone else wanted her to be. It was time to find herself on her own. As she drove into the night, the weight of her decision settled over her like a heavy cloak. But beneath that weight, there was also something else, a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Olivia had always been the quiet one. The kind of person who preferred books over parties, who would rather stay home than deal with the noise of a crowded social life. She had always known where she fit in the family dynamics, second place. Her older sister, Sophie, was the star. The one who lit up the room, who always had the answers, who everyone turned to for support and advice. It had never bothered Olivia, at least, not until now. Growing up in the small town of Brooksville, Olivia had learned early on that being in the background was safe. She wasn't as outgoing or as confident as Sophie, but she was always the dependable one. The one who helped with the housework, who made sure their parents didn't feel the burden of too many responsibilities. She was always there, the one no one really noticed until they needed something. Sophie was everything Olivia wasn't: outgoing, popular, a natural leader. She had a way of making everyone feel special and, at the same time, making sure she was the center of attention. She was the one who got the awards at school, the one who had friends lining up for advice, the one who got into the best colleges. And Olivia? She was the one in the shadows, cheering from the sidelines, just happy to be part of the picture. But it wasn't that Olivia didn't try. Oh, she tried. She worked hard in school, just as hard as Sophie did. She pushed herself to be as good as her sister in everything: academics, sports, even friendships. But there was always this invisible gap between them. No matter how much Olivia gave, Sophie's shine was always a little brighter, a little more noticeable. The gap wasn't just between her and Sophie, it was between Olivia and her parents as well. They loved her, of course. But they loved Sophie too, and it was clear to Olivia that Sophie was the one they admired. Sophie was the one who needed the most support, the one who brought excitement into the family. And Olivia, as much as she tried to make a difference, always felt like the afterthought. "Olivia, why can't you be more like Sophie?" her father would say, his voice full of frustration whenever Olivia did something wrong. He never meant it maliciously, but the words stuck with her, sinking deep into her psyche. No matter how hard she tried to please him, it never felt like enough. She could never be Sophie, and that was what hurt the most. Because deep down, Olivia knew she would never be her sister. Her mother, too, had always been closer to Sophie. Whenever Olivia needed support or a comforting word, it was always Sophie who got the attention. Olivia's mom would smile at her and say, "You're fine, sweetheart, just keep doing what you're doing." But Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that her mom didn't truly see her, not the way she saw Sophie. It wasn't just in their home. Olivia's friends, too, couldn't help but compare her to Sophie. Sophie was the one they talked about, the one they admired. It wasn't that Olivia didn't have her own friends, she did, but they always gravitated towards Sophie, the life of the party, the one who always had the most interesting stories, the one everyone wanted to be around. And so Olivia stayed in her place. She kept to herself, focused on school, and avoided rocking the boat. She didn't mind that Sophie was the star of the family. It was easier to stay out of the spotlight, to be the one who quietly supported everyone else. Besides, Olivia had never really wanted the spotlight. Or at least, That's what she told herself. But there was always that nagging feeling, the feeling that she wasn't enough, that no matter what she did, she would always be overshadowed by Sophie. And as the years passed, that feeling grew stronger. Even in the most important moments of Olivia's life, Sophie seemed to take center stage. Take, for example, their high school graduation. Sophie had been valedictorian, the one giving the speech, the one whose name everyone remembered. Olivia had been proud of her sister, of course, she had, but deep down, she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever get that kind of recognition. That same year, their parents had been busy planning Sophie's graduation party, picking out a dress for her, booking a venue for the event. Olivia had been happy for Sophie, but there was a part of her that felt like she was just another face in the crowd. She had graduated with honors, too, but there had been no party for her, no grand celebration. Instead, her parents had quietly congratulated her and moved on to the next thing, Sophie's upcoming college interviews. There was a time when Olivia had tried to speak up, to ask for attention, to ask for validation. But every time she did, it felt like the words got caught in her throat. Whenever she said something, it was overshadowed by Sophie's voice, her laugh, her stories. And so Olivia stayed quiet, retreating further into herself. She didn't want to be the one who complained. She didn't want to be the one who made a scene. So she kept everything inside, tried to be strong, tried to be the daughter and sister everyone needed, even when it meant losing pieces of herself along the way. But there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when Olivia wondered if her family would ever truly see her. If they would ever see the person behind the quiet exterior, the person who was just as capable, just as worthy of love, just as deserving of attention as Sophie. And now, here she was, sitting in her room, her world shattered by a single phone call. Sophie had always been the one to speak up, to make her feelings known. And today, for the first time in her life, Olivia had done the same. But unlike all those other times, this time, it hadn't worked out the way she hoped. Her parents had sided with Sophie. They had agreed that Olivia had somehow ruined everything, that she was the cause of the chaos in their family. As Olivia stared out the window, the weight of her family's rejection settling on her shoulders, she couldn't help but ask herself, was I really just a distraction? And in that moment, Olivia realized that she had to leave. She had to find out who she really was, away from Sophie's shadow, away from the family that had never fully understood her. It wasn't just about getting away anymore. It was about reclaiming her identity, finding her own worth. She was ready to step into the unknown, ready to carve out a place for herself. A place where she could be seen not as Sophie's little sister, but as Olivia. The drive was long, longer than Olivia had expected. As the headlights of her car sliced through the darkness, the city lights flickered in the distance like a promise of something new, something different. But even with the vast emptiness of the night surrounding her, Olivia couldn't escape the growing pit in her stomach. Every mile felt like a step further from everything she knew, from the family she had grown up with. And with every passing minute, the weight of her decision grew heavier. She thought about the conversation she'd had earlier. Sophie's angry words echoed in her mind. You've ruined everything, Olivia. You've always been in the way. Always. Sophie had been furious, yes, but there was something else in her tone too, something colder, more calculating. Sophie's anger wasn't just about the situation at hand. It was a culmination of years of built-up resentment, of frustrations Olivia hadn't even known about. And then, their parents. Olivia's mother had been uncharacteristically detached, as if the woman who had always been her protector had suddenly forgotten who she was. Her father, too, had sounded more distant than usual, almost clinical in his judgment. It's time to face the consequences, he had said, as if her entire life was some series of mistakes to be corrected. Olivia could feel the resentment seeping into her thoughts, twisting them into something ugly. The people who had always promised to have her back, her parents, her sister, had turned their backs on her. They'd sided with Sophie. And now Olivia was alone. As she passed the first sign marking the city's edge, Olivia made the decision. She couldn't go back. There was no home to return to, not anymore. The family she had known, the family she had loved, had left her behind. She was no longer just Olivia, she was a stranger in her own home. The drive felt endless, and as the city lights grew closer, so did her mounting anger and confusion. She had done everything right, hadn't she? She'd been there for Sophie when no one else was. She'd done all the right things, followed the rules, worked hard. Yet, in the end, none of it mattered. No one cared. No one saw her. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down at the screen, and her heart skipped a beat. 21 missed calls. Her stomach lurched. Olivia didn't even need to look at the contact name. She knew it was from Sophie. And her parents were probably calling, too. She didn't answer. The anger inside her surged, and she slammed her fist against the steering wheel. The sound of the horn blaring out of frustration echoed in the empty night. Sophie had turned everyone against her, and for what? To prove that she was the better daughter, the better person? Olivia couldn't understand it. As she drove on, the tension in her chest mounted. Her mind replayed the last moments in her house, the final moments with her family. The tears in her eyes were not just from sadness, they were from anger, betrayal, and confusion. How could they do this to her? Hadn't they seen how hard she had tried? How much she had loved them? But there was no time to dwell on it now. Olivia couldn't let herself fall apart. She had made the choice to leave, and she had to follow through. The road ahead stretched out before her, the path unclear, but the feeling of moving forward was all she had. It wasn't a feeling of freedom, not yet, but it was a feeling of necessity. She had to keep going, even if she didn't know where she was going. She pulled into a small gas station, her hands shaking as she pumped gas. Her heart was still racing, and she felt a tight knot in her chest. The isolation of the moment felt overwhelming. Standing alone in a dark parking lot in a strange town, the world so far away from the place she had once called home. Olivia took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, but her mind was a whirlwind. She had thought she was prepared for this. She had told herself that leaving would be the right thing to do, that it was the only choice she had left. But now, out here, in the middle of nowhere, it all felt different. When the gas tank clicked off, she paid for her fuel and got back into the car, her mind still spinning. She had no idea where she was going. She hadn't planned this part out. The reality of being alone without a destination was starting to settle in, and the fear of the unknown gripped her with a force she hadn't expected. She dialed a number, her best friend, Claire, the only person who had ever truly understood her. "Hello," Claire answered, her voice a soft relief. "Claire, Olivia's voice cracked. "I don't know what to do. I left everything. What happened?" Claire's voice immediately shifted to concern. "Olivia, what's going on? Are you okay?" I don't know," Olivia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're all against me. Sophie, Mom, Dad. They're all angry. They think I ruined everything, Claire." Claire was quiet for a moment. Olivia could hear the soft rustle of her friends breathing on the other end of the line. "Olivia, you know I'm here for you, right? Always. But tell me, what happened? What exactly went down?" Olivia let out a shaky breath, the floodgates opening as she explained everything: the fight, the accusations, the cold silence that followed. She explained how her family had turned on her, how Sophie had thrown her under the bus, how her parents had sided with her, how her own sister, the person she had tried to protect for so long, had now become her biggest enemy. "I'm just lost," Olivia said, her voice breaking. "I don't even know who I am anymore, Claire. I thought they loved me, but it turns out they never really saw me. I'm just invisible. I don't know what to do." Claire's voice softened. You're not invisible, Liv. You're stronger than you realize. And you're not alone. I'm here. Wherever you go, I'm here. Olivia held the phone to her ear, feeling the weight of her friend's words sink in. She wasn't truly alone. But she wasn't sure if that was enough. As she ended the call, she glanced at the road ahead, unsure of what lay before her. But one thing was clear. The road back home was closed. There was no going back. And for the first time in a long while, Olivia allowed herself to feel something other than anger or sadness, hope. It was small, but it was there, flickering like a distant star. The hope that, one day, she would find a way to make peace with herself. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. With one last glance at her phone, 21 missed calls, Olivia turned the car back onto the road, the hum of the engine the only sound accompanying her as she drove deeper into the unknown. The next morning was gray. The kind of gray that seeped into your bones, making everything feel dull and heavy. Olivia woke up in the unfamiliar hotel room, the smell of stale coffee in the air and the soft hum of traffic outside. It felt strange not to have her family's voices echoing through the house, not to have the pressure of maintaining appearances. She was alone, and though the silence should have been comforting, it felt suffocating. She hadn't planned to stay in the hotel for more than a night. She was supposed to have driven straight to the city, start over, build a new life. But after the chaos of yesterday, leaving her family behind, Sophie's accusations, the uncertainty, Olivia had needed time to breathe, to collect her thoughts. She sat on the edge of the bed, her phone in her hands. The screen displayed 21 missed calls again. 21. The weight of the numbers felt like a physical force pressing against her chest. She hadn't called back. She wasn't sure she wanted to. It wasn't just Sophie's anger she was avoiding, it was the silence from her parents. The silence that felt like an indictment of her very existence. Olivia had always known her family was fractured in some ways. Sophie had always been the golden child, the one who seemed to do everything right. And Olivia had been the dependable one, the one who did what was expected but never seemed to be noticed. But now that she had stepped away, it felt like everything had come crashing down, revealing just how much was held together by a fragile thread. Olivia pushed the thought away. She couldn't keep dwelling on her family. They had made their choice, and she had made hers. It was time to focus on what came next. She stood up and walked over to the window, looking out over the city. It was bigger than Brooksville, more chaotic, more alive. Cars honked, people rushed by, each person absorbed in their own world. It made her feel even smaller, like a single grain of sand in a vast desert. But at the same time, it made her feel free. The question she had been avoiding hung in the back of her mind. Where do I go from here? Her phone buzzed again, and she froze. This time, it was a text message from Claire. Are you okay? Call me when you can. I'm worried about you. Olivia stared at the screen for a moment, considering her response. It would be so easy to call Claire, to vent and pour out her feelings. But she didn't want to be weak. She didn't want to admit how much this hurt, how much it had broken her to walk away from everything she had ever known. She didn't want to seem like a victim. Instead, Olivia typed a quick response. I'm okay, just figuring things out. She hit send and sat back down on the bed, letting out a long breath. It was time to stop thinking about what she had left behind and start thinking about what she could create now. But the idea of starting over from scratch was daunting. She had no job lined up, no plan, no idea what she was going to do next. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt unmoored. She was a person without a direction, without an anchor. A knock on the door broke her thoughts. Olivia jumped, startled by the sound. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, she wondered if it was someone from her family, Sophie, maybe, coming to beg her to come back. But when she opened the door, it wasn't her family at all. A man in his mid-30s stood in the hallway, holding a clipboard. He wore a friendly smile, though his eyes were a little too sharp, as though he were trying to figure out something that wasn't quite right. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his voice warm. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm with a local nonprofit, and we're offering free services to people who are new to the city. We help people get settled, find housing, maybe a job, that sort of thing. Would you be interested?" Olivia stared at him for a moment, confused. She wasn't sure if she should be offended by the intrusion or grateful for the offer. But his presence, unexpected as it was, sparked something inside her. A small flicker of hope. I don't know," Olivia said slowly, her mind still spinning. "I wasn't planning on staying here long. I just need some time to figure things out." The man nodded, as though he understood. "I get it. It's tough when you're new somewhere. If you change your mind, here's my card. Just give me a call. No pressure." He handed her the card, and Olivia took it automatically, still unsure what to make of the situation. But there was something about his offer that felt like a lifeline. Maybe this was the fresh start she had been looking for, the direction she had been too afraid to seek. She closed the door, still holding the card in her hand, turning it over a few times. This could be the beginning of something new, she thought, even though she wasn't sure what that something was. Still, she knew she couldn't keep running from her problems. She had left her family, but now it was time to leave behind the fear and self-doubt that had always followed her. She had to start making choices for herself, choices that would shape who she was going to become. Olivia took a deep breath and decided to take the first step forward. The world outside was waiting. That afternoon, Olivia found herself sitting across from the same man, whose name was Ben, in a small community center. The nonprofit had set up a workshop for newcomers, offering a mix of resources and advice on navigating the city. It wasn't much, but it felt like a start. Ben was an easy person to talk to. As he went over the various programs the organization offered, Olivia found herself opening up in a way she hadn't expected. She told him about her decision to leave her family, her feelings of betrayal, and her fear of being lost in the city. "You know," Ben said, pausing for a moment, "I think you're doing something really brave. Not many people have the courage to make a change like that. A lot of people stay stuck in unhealthy situations because they're afraid of the unknown. You're already on your way to something better. It might not feel like it right now, but you're doing the right thing." For the first time since she had left, Olivia felt the weight of her decision lift, even if just a little. Maybe Ben was right. Maybe, despite everything that had happened, this was the beginning of something new, something she had never allowed herself to hope for. As she walked out of the community center later that afternoon, Olivia glanced up at the skyline, the towering buildings that felt both intimidating and full of promise. She didn't know what her future would look like, but she was beginning to see that she had the power to shape it. And in that moment, the uncertainty didn't seem so terrifying anymore. The next few days in the city felt like a blur to Olivia. Between meeting with the nonprofit, starting to explore her options, and trying to adjust to the overwhelming feeling of being completely alone, everything seemed both rushed and incredibly slow at the same time. She was going through the motions, taking one step after another, but it felt like she wasn't really moving anywhere at all. Her thoughts constantly wandered back to her family. The phone calls that still kept piling up from her parents, from Sophie. Every time she glanced at her phone, her heart skipped a beat, but she refused to pick it up. She couldn't bear to listen to their voices, filled with anger and disappointment. The ache in her chest had become a constant companion, gnawing at her from the inside out. She tried to keep busy. She spent her days in the local library, scouring job listings and making inquiries about apartments. At night, she would walk through the city streets, feeling small and insignificant among the towering buildings, but there was a part of her that found solace in the anonymity. In Brooksville, everyone knew her. Here, she was just another face in the crowd, and for the first time in a long time, That felt freeing. But despite all her efforts to move forward, something was still missing. Something she couldn't put her finger on. It was like there was a piece of her puzzle that had fallen into the cracks, and she couldn't figure out how to find it again. One evening, as Olivia was sitting in a small cafe near her temporary apartment, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, her phone buzzed again. The familiar notification flashed on the screen, this time with an unexpected message. From Claire. I just got a call from Sophie. She's been trying to get in touch with you. Olivia, I think you should know she's really sick. They said it's serious. I don't know all the details, but I think you need to hear this from me before you hear it from anyone else. The words hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. Sophie. Sick? Her sister, the one who had always seemed invincible, always so full of life and energy, now sick? The thought was impossible to process. Sophie had always been the strong one, the one who carried everything on her shoulders, and Olivia had been the one left in the shadows. And now it seemed that even in the midst of her own pain, Sophie was fighting something much worse. Olivia's hands trembled as she put the phone down. She stared blankly at the screen, unable to process the message. For a moment, she felt dizzy, as though the world was spinning around her. How could this be happening? How could Sophie, the person who had always been so distant from her, now be the one needing help? Her mind raced, conflicting emotions bubbling to the surface. She wanted to reach out to Sophie, to somehow make everything better, to fix things. But how could she? Was it even her place anymore? But then, another thought crept in. What if she didn't reach out? What if she kept going, kept building her life here, leaving behind the people who had hurt her? Wasn't this the whole reason she had left in the first place? To escape the toxicity? To find peace? But how could she abandon Sophie now, in her moment of need? The internal tug-of-war was exhausting. Olivia's chest tightened with guilt, with fear. She had spent so long trying to forget her family, trying to prove that she could survive without them, but now, in the face of Sophie's illness, everything felt different. Claire's text had left her with more questions than answers. What kind of sickness was it? How serious was it? And why hadn't Sophie told her herself? She hadn't heard from Sophie in days, not since the fight. Her sister hadn't tried to reach out to her directly. That stung. Was it because of the fight? Because of everything that had happened? There was a knock at the cafe door, pulling Olivia from her thoughts. She looked up to see a familiar face, Ben, the man from the nonprofit. He smiled as he entered the cafe, scanning the room before locking eyes with Olivia. Hey, mind if I join you? He asked, his voice calm and reassuring. Olivia hesitated for a moment, still lost in her thoughts. But something about his presence, something about the kindness he had shown her, felt grounding. Sure, she said, trying to offer a small smile. Ben sat down across from her, noticing the tension in her posture. You look like you've got a lot on your mind. Olivia couldn't bring herself to lie. She knew he could see the pain in her eyes. I got some news, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophie, she's really sick. Ben's expression softened. He didn't say anything for a moment, just nodded as if understanding the weight of what Olivia was feeling. I'm really sorry, Olivia, he said gently. That must be incredibly hard. Olivia nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She hadn't let herself cry since she left Brooksville, but now, as the reality of Sophie's illness settled in, the tears were right there, just waiting to spill over. I don't know what to do, she admitted. I left. I thought I was doing the right thing. But now she's sick, and I don't know if I can just ignore it. I don't know if I can keep running away. Ben leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. I can't tell you what to do, Olivia. But I can tell you that running away from your feelings won't make them disappear. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to face them head-on. Olivia bit her lip, her eyes misting. Face them head-on. It was what she had been avoiding all along. The fear, the hurt, the unresolved tension between her and Sophie, It had all built up over the years, and now it was all coming to a head. She couldn't hide from it anymore. "I'm scared," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "I'm scared that if I go back, things won't be different. I'm scared I'll be sucked back into the same old patterns, the same old fights." Ben nodded again, his eyes kind but firm. "You won't know unless you try, Olivia. You're not the same person you were when you left. You've grown, and maybe this is your chance to show them who you really are." Olivia stared at him, feeling both relieved and terrified. Was he right? Could she really go back? Could she fix things with Sophie, with her family? Or had too much time passed, too much damage been done? Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Claire. "Sophie's been in the hospital for a few days now. The doctors think it's serious. She's asking for you. Olivia, she needs you." The words hit Olivia like a ton of bricks. Sophie needed her. Sophie needed her. All the pain, all the anger, suddenly it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the sister who was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. Olivia's heart raced as she looked up at Ben, her decision suddenly clear. She couldn't run anymore. She couldn't let fear dictate her life. She had to face what had been broken and try to fix it, for herself and for Sophie. With trembling hands, she stood up, grabbing her coat. "I have to go," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Ben didn't try to stop her. He simply smiled, a quiet understanding in his eyes. "I think you know what you need to do, Olivia." And with that, Olivia walked out of the cafe, her mind set on what she had to do next. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was for sure, she wasn't going to let her sister fight alone. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Olivia's heart raced as she navigated the busy streets, her feet moving faster than her mind could process. The city, which had once felt so vast and intimidating, now seemed like a blur, a distant memory of a life that felt like it had been someone else's. She was running on autopilot, only one thing on her mind: getting back to Brooksville, back to Sophie. The bus ride felt endless. Each mile that passed took her further from the life she had been trying to build here and closer to the family she had left behind. The city lights slowly faded into the horizon as the bus headed down winding country roads toward the small town she had once called home. Olivia felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. She hadn't spoken to Sophie in days. What would she even say when she saw her sister? What if Sophie was angry, or worse, what if she blamed Olivia for leaving in the first place? Would their relationship ever be the same again? The questions swirled in her mind, but deep down, Olivia knew there was no turning back now. Sophie needed her. This wasn't about past hurts or regrets anymore. It was about family, and despite everything, Olivia couldn't abandon that. She had to face her past head-on, even if it meant confronting the pain she had left behind. When the bus finally pulled into Brooksville, it was almost dawn. The streets were quiet, still, like the town itself was holding its breath. Olivia stepped off the bus and took a deep breath, the familiar scent of pine trees and damp earth filling her lungs. It was strange to be back. This town had once felt like a cage, but now, standing here, it felt like a place of unresolved chapters, waiting for closure. She pulled out her phone and called Claire. It rang twice before Claire picked up. "Olivia?" Claire's voice was soft, tentative. Are you here?" "I'm here," Olivia replied, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm on my way to the hospital now. I'm coming to see Sophie." Claire let out a long, shaky breath. "I'm glad. She's been asking for you. She's been through a lot, Liv. I don't know what's going on, but she's really scared. I think she's afraid she might not make it." Olivia's stomach twisted. Sophie scared? It was hard to imagine. Sophie had always been the one who seemed invincible, the one who had everything together. The idea that she might be vulnerable, might need her, truly need her, was something Olivia had never expected. "I'll be there soon. Tell her I'm coming, okay?" "Of course. She's going to be so happy to see you." Olivia hung up, the knot in her stomach growing tighter. She hadn't prepared herself for this. She thought that by leaving, she could escape the emotional turmoil, but now, facing Sophie in the hospital, facing all the pain she had buried, it felt like everything was coming back at once. The walk to the hospital felt like the longest of her life. The familiar streets, the houses she used to pass on her way home from school, the stores where she had bought her first cell phone, it all seemed so distant now, like a dream she could barely remember. When she reached the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic and the hum of fluorescent lights were a stark contrast to the warmth she remembered from her childhood. Olivia hesitated at the entrance, her hands trembling. She wasn't sure if she was ready to see Sophie, to confront all the years of unresolved conflict. But she couldn't turn back now, not when her sister needed her. Taking a deep breath, Olivia stepped inside. The hospital was eerily quiet at this early hour, with only a few nurses walking down the halls, their footsteps echoing in the otherwise silent space. Olivia followed the signs to the ICU, her steps hesitant, her heart pounding louder with each step she took. When she reached Sophie's room, she stopped at the door, her hand hovering over the handle. She had to prepare herself. This might not be the sister she had known all these years. Sophie might look different. She might be different. But Olivia couldn't let that stop her. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. Sophie lay in the bed, pale and fragile, her face slightly turned to the side. Machines beeped softly in the background, monitoring her vitals. It was almost impossible to recognize her, the once vibrant, energetic woman who had always seemed so full of life now looked so small, so helpless. For a moment, Olivia froze in the doorway. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. It was as if the sight of her sister in this vulnerable state had stolen her breath away. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was real, it was harder than she had ever anticipated. Then Sophie's eyes fluttered open. Her gaze was cloudy at first, but when she saw Olivia standing there, her face softened, and her lips parted in a quiet, fragile whisper. "Liv." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She sat down beside Sophie's bed, taking her sister's cold hand in hers. "I'm here," Olivia said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here, Sophie. I'm so sorry. I never should have left." Sophie's eyes filled with tears, her hand tightening around Olivia's. "You didn't ruin anything, Liv," she whispered. "I was angry, I was so angry at you, but I never wanted you to leave. I just didn't know how to deal with everything, with Mom, with Dad, with us. I was scared. But I never wanted you to go." Olivia's heart ached at the vulnerability in her sister's voice. Sophie had always been the strong one, the one who had held it all together, and now, here she was, admitting to her own fears, her own insecurities. For the first time, Olivia realized just how much her sister had been carrying on her own. "I know," Olivia whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I was scared too. I didn't know how to fix us. I thought if I left, everything would be better, but I see now that it wasn't. I see now that I've been running from the wrong things." Sophie's weak smile brought a warmth to Olivia's chest, a sense of connection she hadn't felt in years. "It's not too late," Sophie whispered, her voice shaky. "We can fix this. We can fix us." Olivia squeezed her sister's hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. "We'll fix it together," she said, her voice strong for the first time in a long while. "I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, Olivia realized that the pain she had been carrying, the hurt and anger, wasn't just something to be buried or run from. It was something to be faced, something to be healed. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, Olivia knew she wasn't alone. And that was enough. It had been a week since Olivia returned to Brooksville, and things were slowly starting to feel like they were falling back into place, though not without its struggles. The hospital visits had become a daily routine, with Olivia spending hours by Sophie's side, watching her sister slowly regain her strength. Sophie's illness, although still serious, wasn't as critical as the doctors had first feared, and every small improvement felt like a victory. But as much as things were improving on the surface, the tension between Olivia and her parents still loomed over them like a heavy cloud. Her mother and father, though happy to have Olivia back, were clearly still grappling with the events that had led to her leaving. There were the uncomfortable silences at the dinner table, the half-hearted attempts at casual conversation, and the undercurrent of unresolved anger. The elephant in the room was impossible to ignore. Olivia knew it was time to face them. She couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine, especially now that Sophie needed them all. She had been avoiding them, not knowing how to bridge the gap that had grown between them, but that avoidance could only last so long. One afternoon, as Olivia sat in the waiting area of the hospital while Sophie rested, she picked up her phone and hesitated for a moment. There were still dozens of unread messages from her parents, but one stood out. It was from her mother. "Liv, we need to talk. Come home. We'll be waiting for you." Her heart dropped into her stomach. The anxiety that had been bubbling in her chest for days now took root. This was it, the conversation she had been avoiding. She had to go home, face her parents, and finally talk about everything that had been left unsaid for so long. As she stepped out of the hospital and into the cool, crisp evening air, Olivia found herself standing at a crossroads. She didn't know what the future would look like, but she knew it couldn't continue like this. She couldn't keep hiding from her family, pretending that nothing had happened. They all needed to confront the past if they had any hope of moving forward. When she arrived at her parents' house, the door was already open. Her mother was standing in the doorway, her arms folded across her chest, her expression unreadable. Olivia felt a surge of guilt, a mix of old hurts and new ones, but she swallowed it down. This was not the time to retreat. "Not anymore, Mom," Olivia said, her voice steady but uncertain. "I'm here." Her mother nodded, stepping aside to let her in. Olivia hesitated at the threshold, then crossed the familiar threshold, the house still smelling faintly of lavender and wood polish, just as it had when she was a child. The sound of soft jazz played in the background, something Olivia always used to enjoy as a kid but hadn't listened to in years. "Sit down, honey," her mother said softly, gesturing toward the living room. "We've been waiting for you." Olivia took a deep breath and sat down on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her father was in the kitchen, though she could tell he was aware of the conversation that was about to happen. She could hear the clinking of dishes as he moved about, but he didn't come into the room. This was something they had to face on their own. Her mother sat across from her, her expression softening. "We're glad you're back, Liv. We never wanted you to leave, but I understand why you did." The words felt like a balm to Olivia's raw wounds. Her mother's voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of pain that she couldn't ignore. "I didn't leave because I wanted to hurt you," Olivia said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know what else to do." Everything felt so suffocating. It felt like no matter how hard I tried, nothing was ever enough. And I felt like I had to get out, to figure things out on my own. Her mother nodded slowly, as if she had heard this explanation before. "I understand that. I really do. But we never wanted you to feel like that. You were always enough, Liv. You didn't have to carry everything by yourself." Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so many years believing that she wasn't enough, that she was just the other sister, the one who didn't matter as much. She had internalized that, believing that the only way to prove her worth was by being perfect, by being the ideal daughter. But the truth was, that was never going to be enough. She had been running from her own pain, from their expectations, and from the idea of failing them. "I thought I could fix everything by running away," Olivia said softly, tears beginning to well up in her eyes. "But I see now that running didn't fix anything. It only made things worse. I thought leaving was the answer, but all it did was leave me with more questions." Her mother reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Olivia, I know we made mistakes. We weren't perfect, but we loved you. And I think we all need to learn how to do better, how to communicate better. But I don't want you to carry that weight by yourself anymore. I want us to heal together." Olivia could feel the tears brimming in her eyes, but she fought them back. She wasn't sure if she could fully forgive everything that had happened. But in that moment, she realized something crucial. Healing wasn't about perfection, it was about moving forward, about acknowledging the hurt and the mistakes and making the choice to do better. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. As she sat there, her heart heavy yet lighter than it had been in years, Olivia heard the soft shuffle of footsteps from the kitchen. Her father appeared, looking older and more weary than she remembered, but his eyes were filled with something new, regret, perhaps, but also a genuine desire to make things right. "Liv," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm sorry. I should have listened more. I should have seen what you were going through. I didn't know how to help." Olivia looked up at him, meeting his gaze for the first time in a long while. Her throat tightened as she finally allowed herself to feel the weight of all the years they had lost, but she also knew that this was where it had to start. She had to allow herself to forgive. They all had to allow themselves to heal. "I know, Dad," Olivia said softly, "and I'm sorry too. For everything." Her father nodded, stepping forward and pulling her into a warm, tight embrace. It was the first real hug they had shared in years, and for a moment, Olivia allowed herself to melt into it, to feel the closeness that had been missing for so long. When they pulled apart, her mother spoke again, her voice hopeful. "So, what happens now?" Olivia looked between them, the weight of the question hanging in the air. She wasn't sure yet what would happen, what her future with her family would look like, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she was facing it alone. "I don't know," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm willing to try. We'll take it one day at a time." Her mother smiled, and her father nodded. "That's all we can do." As Olivia sat there, surrounded by the people who had once felt so distant, she realized something profound. A healing didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a simple fix, but it was possible. And that was enough. The days that followed Olivia's heart-to-heart with her parents were both comforting and daunting. The air in the house had shifted, and though it wasn't entirely free of tension, it was lighter. They had started communicating in ways they hadn't in years. Her mother, who had always been the quieter, more reserved one, began offering words of encouragement, and her father, who, though he still wore his stoic, distant demeanor, had begun to open up more, sharing his own regrets, and even a few memories from Olivia's childhood she had long forgotten. But despite the progress at home, there was something stirring deep within Olivia that couldn't be ignored. She wasn't just reconciling with her family. She was facing herself. The weight that had been pulling her down, the unresolved guilt, the deep-seated belief that she wasn't good enough, those things had been part of her for so long that they had become second nature. She had buried them under a mountain of distractions, under the guise of wanting to fix everything else. But in the weeks since Sophie's illness, and since her return to Brooksville, she had begun to realize that she couldn't fix anyone else until she fixed herself. She had spent so long being the strong one for others, the dependable one, the daughter who always did her best to meet expectations. But now, with Sophie recovering and her parents finally willing to have honest conversations, Olivia found herself standing at the precipice of something she hadn't considered in a long time. What did she really want? Who was she, beyond the role she had played in her family? Her thoughts often drifted back to the city, to the life she had tried to create there, far away from Brooksville. It hadn't been perfect either, but there was a part of her that had felt freer in those chaotic streets, in the constant buzz of people who didn't know her. She could reinvent herself there. She had been able to escape the pressure, the expectations. But now, she wasn't so sure that was the answer. She had learned so much from being back, from being with Sophie, from talking to her parents. Still, a small part of her felt like she was being pulled in two different directions. One crisp afternoon, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, Olivia found herself alone at the old lake behind her childhood home. It had been years since she had come here. This was where she and Sophie used to come in the summers to talk about their dreams, their secrets, and their fears. The water reflected the fading light in a way that made the whole scene feel surreal, like something out of a dream. Sitting on the edge of the dock, Olivia let her feet dangle above the water. She had always loved this place. It had been her sanctuary. Even when things had been the most difficult with her family, or when she felt overwhelmed by life's pressures, she would come here to clear her mind. Today, it felt different, though. It wasn't just about clearing her mind anymore. It was about finally confronting what she wanted her life to be. She had spent so many years burying her desires under the weight of others' expectations. Now, she realized that maybe it was time to let herself be seen, not as a daughter or a sister, but as Olivia. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Sophie. "You coming by later? I miss you." A smile tugged at Olivia's lips. Her sister was well on the mend, though the road to full recovery was still long. She had been so strong through everything, and Olivia admired that more than anything. Sophie was an anchor for her, just as much as Olivia had been for Sophie during the hardest times. The bond they had was undeniable, and no matter where their lives took them, it was a bond that couldn't be broken. Olivia texted back, "Of course. I'll be there soon. Just needed some time to think." As she slipped the phone back into her pocket, her mind wandered back to what Sophie had said during their heart-to-heart in the hospital. "We can fix this, Liv." Those words still echoed in her mind. They both had so much healing to do, but what Sophie had said made Olivia realize that healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about accepting what had been and growing from it. And part of that growth meant being honest with herself. When Olivia returned to the house, she found her parents in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the air, and for a moment, she was transported back to simpler times when everything felt more stable. Her father looked up as she entered, a small, tentative smile on his face. "How's Sophie?" he asked, setting down a knife as he wiped his hands on a towel. "Better," Olivia replied, the words coming easily now. "She's going to be okay. She's tough." Her mother, who had been chopping vegetables at the counter, paused and looked up. "We're all tougher than we think, sometimes." Her voice was warm, but there was an undertone of reflection, of something unspoken. Olivia couldn't help but nod. It was true. She had always believed that her strength had to come from pushing through, from never showing weakness. But the reality was that her true strength had always been in her ability to face the tough moments, to confront them, and to allow herself to feel vulnerable. That was where the healing was. After dinner, Olivia and Sophie sat together on the porch. The air was cool, and the crickets were singing their evening song. Sophie had recovered enough to be out of bed, but she still looked frail, her body not quite back to its full strength. Yet there was something about her presence that filled Olivia with hope. "I've been thinking," Olivia said softly, turning to her sister, "about everything. About us. About how we grew up." Sophie shifted, pulling her legs up onto the chair and hugging her knees to her chest. "Yeah," she asked quietly, her eyes on the distant horizon. Olivia hesitated, trying to put her thoughts into words. I think I've been so caught up in trying to fix everything, trying to make everyone happy, that I lost myself. I lost what I really wanted." Sophie gave her a soft smile. "I think we all do that sometimes. But you don't have to carry everything, Liv. Not alone." Olivia looked at her sister, her heart swelling with gratitude. Sophie had always been the one to hold things together, to keep her grounded. And now, Olivia realized that their healing journey wasn't about fixing everything at once. It was about finding balance and understanding that both of them had their own struggles to navigate. "I'm going to take some time," Olivia said after a pause. "I'm going to figure out what I want for me, not for anyone else. I think that's the only way I can be the person I need to be, not just for you or Mom and Dad, but for myself." Sophie nodded, her gaze soft. "I think that's a good idea. You deserve it, Liv." The weeks that followed Olivia's quiet resolve to rediscover herself were a delicate balance of introspection and new beginnings. She spent more time with her family, but not as the person they had known before, someone who had tried to keep everything together and everyone happy. No, now Olivia was trying to be more honest with herself and with them, to express what she needed, even when it felt uncomfortable. Sophie continued to recover steadily. It was slow and painful, but each day brought new progress. And while Olivia still couldn't fully reconcile everything from the past, she was no longer running away from the hurt. She was learning to sit with it, to allow herself to grieve not just the things that had happened, but the years she had spent putting everyone else's needs before her own. As spring turned into summer, the weather grew warmer and the days felt longer. Olivia began to find a rhythm again. She spent more time outdoors, working on the garden her parents had tended to for years, something her mother had always enjoyed, but had left neglected during Sophie's illness. It was symbolic, in a way. She was planting new seeds for herself, for her family, for their future. One afternoon, while tending to a patch of roses, Olivia heard the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. She turned and saw her father, a soft smile on his face, holding a cup of lemonade. "Thought you might need a break," he said, offering her the drink. Olivia smiled gratefully, wiping her hands on her jeans before taking the cup. "Thanks, Dad." They stood there for a moment, side by side, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. There was something peaceful about the quiet, something grounding. "Everything okay?" her father asked, his voice gentle. Olivia paused, taking a sip of the lemonade. The cool sweetness washed over her, reminding her of summers spent in this very garden when she was young and carefree. "Yeah, I'm good," she said, her voice steady. "I've been thinking a lot about the past, and about where I'm going. About what I want." Her father nodded, his gaze softening. "You know, you don't have to have it all figured out right now. We're all still figuring it out." "I know," Olivia said, her voice almost a whisper. "But I feel like I'm getting closer. For the first time in a long time, I'm not just running. I'm standing still, trying to see where I am, what I really want." Her father smiled, a quiet understanding in his eyes. "I think that's all any of us can do. We just have to keep moving forward, even if it's one step at a time." As Olivia stood there with her father, the warmth of the setting sun soaking into her skin, she felt something inside her shift. She wasn't entirely sure what the future held, but she knew one thing: she was no longer trying to live up to someone else's expectations. She was becoming who she was meant to be. Later that evening, Olivia found herself back in the living room, sitting next to Sophie on the couch. They were watching a movie, an old romantic comedy they had loved when they were younger. The laughter and lightheartedness of the film filled the room, but there was a deep sense of comfort in the quiet moments between the jokes. Sophie leaned her head on Olivia's shoulder, her voice soft. "I'm glad you're here, Liv. Olivia glanced at her sister, her heart swelling. "I'm glad I'm here too." There was no need for more words. They both understood. The bond they shared had always been unspoken, but now it felt more grounded than ever. It wasn't just about being sisters, but about being there for each other through the hardest times, understanding each other in ways that no one else could. As the movie played on, Olivia's thoughts drifted to the changes she had made, to the steps she was taking toward a new life. She was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had accepted that healing didn't happen all at once and that it wasn't linear. Some days were better than others, but it was all part of the journey. The phone on the coffee table buzzed, and Olivia reached for it without thinking. She saw a missed call from her best friend, Ella, and a voicemail. Olivia had been avoiding calls and messages from many of her old friends in the city, not because she didn't care, but because it was easier to keep her distance while she sorted everything out. She clicked on the voicemail, and Ella's voice came through, warm and familiar. "Olivia, I don't know where you are or what's going on, but I miss you. I know it's been a while since we talked, but you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to be you. Call me when you get this." Olivia sat in silence, listening to the message over and over again. It was a simple message, yet it felt like a lifeline. She had spent so long trying to be perfect, trying to be the strong, reliable one for everyone else. But maybe it was time to admit that she didn't have to be perfect to be loved. She didn't have to carry the world on her shoulders. Sophie glanced at Olivia, catching her thoughtful expression. "You should call her back," she said softly. "I will," Olivia said, her voice steady. "I think I'm ready." That night, after the movie ended, Olivia stepped out onto the porch alone, her phone in hand. The stars were beginning to show, twinkling above her, and the night air was cool, carrying the scent of fresh grass and flowers. It was the perfect moment for a phone call that had been a long time coming. She dialed Ella's number, waiting for the familiar ring. When Ella answered, her voice came through, filled with warmth and concern. "Liv," she asked, her voice gentle. "Is everything okay?" Olivia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she had been through. She had spent so many months trying to avoid confronting her own emotions, but now, for the first time in a long time, she was ready to face them. "I think I'm getting there," Olivia said softly. "I think I'm finally figuring things out. I don't have all the answers, but I'm not running anymore." Ella's voice was filled with relief. "That's all we can ask for, Liv. I'm so proud of you." They talked for a while longer, catching up on old times, sharing stories of their lives apart. But what Olivia took away from the conversation wasn't just the nostalgia of the past. It was the understanding that she didn't have to have everything figured out. She didn't need to be perfect, and she didn't need to apologize for not having all the answers. She just needed to be herself. The months passed quickly, each one bringing a fresh sense of possibility for Olivia. The summer days gave way to the crisp, cool air of autumn, and with the change in seasons came a change in her spirit. The confusion and uncertainty that had once clouded her life began to clear, replaced by a growing sense of clarity. Every step she took felt like a small victory, an affirmation that she was, at last, reclaiming herself. She spent more time with Sophie, helping her with physical therapy and encouraging her during the harder days. They had developed a new rhythm, one that was less about obligations and more about genuine connection. There were days when they would laugh for hours, reliving childhood memories, and there were other days when they simply sat in silence, knowing the comfort of each other's presence was enough. Olivia had also started seeing a therapist, someone who helped her unpack the layers of her past and gave her the tools to navigate her emotions. It was a slow process, but each session peeled back another layer of self-doubt, revealing the person she had been all along, strong, capable, and worthy of love and care, just as she was. But despite all the progress she had made in herself, there was still one question lingering in her mind. What about the future? What about her dreams and the life she had left behind in the city? Was it time to go back to the life she had tried to escape, or had she found a new version of herself that could exist here in Brooksville? It was late one afternoon when Olivia found herself in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. She had started looking through the pictures as a way of reconnecting with her childhood, trying to remember the good times before everything became clouded with the challenges of growing up. Her parents were in the kitchen, and Sophie was upstairs, recovering from a long day of therapy. Olivia had always been the one to keep things running smoothly, but now she allowed herself to take a break, something she hadn't done in years. She stopped on a picture of herself, no older than 8, standing next to Sophie at the family picnic. The two of them were grinning, their arms wrapped around each other, with the wide-open sky behind them. Olivia smiled at the memory. They had always been close, even when things at home were difficult. In that moment, everything felt simple and life seemed full of possibilities. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, pulling Olivia from her thoughts. She set the photo album down on the table and went to answer the door. To her surprise, it was Ella standing there, her face breaking into a bright smile as she greeted her. "Liv, I thought I'd come by and see how things were going." "I've missed you," Ella said, stepping forward to give Olivia a quick hug. "I've missed you too," Olivia replied, her voice warm with affection. "Come in, I was just going through some old photos." They sat together on the couch, chatting about everything and nothing, about the people they had met, the places they had been, and the dreams they still held onto. Olivia found herself laughing in a way that felt more genuine than she had in a long time. It was easy with Ella, as if no time had passed between them, as if they hadn't been separated by hundreds of miles for so long. But as the conversation began to settle into a comfortable silence, Olivia felt the familiar weight of her unspoken question press against her chest once again. What was she supposed to do now? Ella noticed the change in Olivia's expression, her smile fading slightly. "Hey, what's going on? You seem, I don't know, distant." Olivia sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "I'm just trying to figure things out. I've been feeling so much better lately, and I've come to terms with a lot of stuff, but I still don't know what the next step is. Do I stay here? Do I go back to the city? There's this part of me that wants to chase what I left behind, but another part of me feels like I'm building something new here, something important." Ella leaned back, thinking for a moment before responding. "You know, Liv, I've always admired how you've tried to fix things for everyone else. But now it's your turn to choose what's best for you. And you don't have to make that decision right away. You've spent so much of your life doing what others needed. Maybe it's time to just focus on you." Olivia stared at her friend, feeling a pang of emotion. "I know, but it's hard. I don't want to disappoint anyone." "You won't disappoint anyone by choosing your happiness," Ella said gently. "You deserve to live your life for yourself." Later that evening, Olivia sat alone on the porch, watching the last of the golden light fade from the sky. She thought about what Ella had said about the importance of choosing happiness, of living for herself. It felt both terrifying and liberating at the same time. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a message from Sophie. "You okay? You've been quiet tonight." Olivia smiled, her heart swelling with affection for her sister. Sophie had always been the one to check in, even when Olivia hadn't been the best at keeping in touch. She quickly typed back a response. "Yeah, just thinking. A lot going on in my head, but I'm getting there." Sophie's reply came almost instantly. "You're doing great, Liv. Don't rush it. You've got time. I'll be here no matter what." Olivia's throat tightened with emotion as she read the message. Sophie was right. She had time. She didn't need to rush her decisions. The road ahead wasn't clear yet, but Olivia was beginning to realize that the uncertainty wasn't something to fear, it was an opportunity. An opportunity to create the life she truly wanted. That night, as Olivia lay in bed, she closed her eyes and thought about everything that had brought her here. every loss, every mistake, every step forward. It had all led her to this moment, and for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace with it. The journey hadn't been easy, and it still wasn't over, but she was learning to trust herself again. She didn't need all the answers right away. She just needed to keep moving forward, one step at a time. And whatever came next, Olivia knew she would face it with courage, with hope, and with the unwavering support of her family and friends. The road ahead was hers to choose, and she was ready for whatever came next. The crisp winter air had settled over Brooksville, and the first snowflakes of the season began to fall softly from the sky. Olivia sat in the cozy kitchen of her childhood home, a steaming mug of tea in her hands, watching the snowflakes drift past the window. It was hard to believe how much had changed in the past few months, how far she had come from the girl who left the city in search of peace, and how much she had learned along the way. Her parents were busy in the living room, discussing the plans for the upcoming family Christmas gathering. Sophie was upstairs, resting after a long day of therapy, and Olivia found herself alone with her thoughts, contemplating the journey she had been on. For the first time in ages, Olivia felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. It had been a few weeks since Ella's visit, and Olivia had continued to reflect on the choices before her. The question of whether to return to the city or stay in Brooksville still lingered, but it no longer held the same weight it once did. She realized that the decision didn't have to be one or the other. Life wasn't about choosing a single path and sticking to it. It was about embracing the possibility of both. She had found peace in Brooksville, in the quiet moments with her family, in the garden where she had rediscovered her connection to nature, and in the relationships she had mended and strengthened. But she also realized that she wasn't done with her journey. There was still so much more she wanted to experience, so much she wanted to learn. And maybe that meant eventually returning to the city, to explore new possibilities and test the limits of who she could become. But not yet. Not now. For now, Olivia was content. That evening, after a family dinner filled with laughter and warmth, Olivia found herself back in the living room with her parents and Sophie. The holiday decorations twinkled around the room, casting a soft glow. It felt like the perfect time to share her thoughts with them. She glanced around the room, her family gathered close, and felt a surge of gratitude for them. They had been the anchors in her life, even when she had struggled to see it. And now, more than ever, she was ready to be open with them, to share the direction her life was heading. "Mom, Dad, Sophie," Olivia began, her voice soft but steady. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what comes next." Her parents paused, looking at her with attentive, loving eyes. "I've realized something," she continued, taking a deep breath. "I don't have to rush into anything. I don't have to have all the answers right now. I've spent so much of my life trying to be everything for everyone else, but now I just want to take things one step at a time." Sophie smiled, nodding. "That sounds like a good plan." Their parents exchanged a glance, then looked back at Olivia with understanding. Her father leaned forward, placing his hand over hers. "Olivia, I know you've been through a lot. We've all been through a lot. But I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the woman you're becoming. Take your time. We'll be here for you no matter what." Olivia's heart swelled with emotion. "Thank you, Dad. I think I've finally figured out that home isn't just a place. It's the people you love, the people who love you back. And that's what I've found here." Her mother's eyes misted over with tears, and she reached for Olivia's hand. "I've always been proud of you, Liv. You're strong, and you've always had a heart full of love. I know whatever you choose to do next, you'll do it with the same strength and grace you've always had." As the evening wore on, Olivia felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. The uncertainty that had once haunted her no longer had the same grip on her heart. The journey hadn't been easy, and she had made mistakes along the way, but she was finally learning to accept them. She was learning to accept herself. She glanced out the window again, watching the snow gently blanket the world outside. It was peaceful, serene, and a little magical. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when everything finally clicked into place. The next day, Olivia decided to take a walk through the town, something she hadn't done in years. She strolled down familiar streets, past the little bookstore she used to visit with Sophie, past the old diner where she had spent countless hours talking with friends. Everything looked just as she remembered it, and yet nothing was the same. As she walked, Olivia thought about the future, her future. She didn't have to know exactly what it would look like, but she knew that whatever path she chose, it would be her own. She had spent so much time trying to live up to others' expectations, but now she was finally ready to live for herself. And in that moment, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. Olivia wasn't running anymore. She was standing still, grounded in the present, looking forward to the future, but with no need to rush. She had time. She had family. She had the strength to face whatever came next. That evening, as she sat around the dinner table with her family, Olivia couldn't help but feel grateful for everything that had led her to this moment. The pain, the struggles, the moments of doubt, they had all brought her here, to a place where she could finally say, with certainty, that she was okay. She wasn't perfect. She hadn't figured it all out. But that was okay. She was learning to trust the process, to accept that life didn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. And with that, Olivia finally felt at home. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?